Today I'm going to read a story. Greg discovers the truth about Brian. This is the behind the scenes video feed. Okay, we're getting ready. Okay. And then, Zach,
Yep.
my people on this will hear the music of Marcy do.
Yeah, they will.
Cool.
Um,
Okay. We're
you
gonna
should hear
it.
the in-between music as well, but I'll lower that so you can talk to them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being patient. Oh, because this is blasting light. Oh, thank you for being patient. Thank you.
Okay,
This is going to be a challenge. Okay.
about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. That's a long time. Maybe I should turn this thing on. No, it's okay. It'll be 15 minutes. Can you hear that too? Oh, thank you. Marcy's World, a place to learn how to begin important conversations with your children, how to set healthy boundaries, address behavior issues, and how to create a safe space in your home. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Nancy Iankowitz. Marcy's World airs between 9 and 10 a.m. Saturday mornings exclusively on WPWL 103.7 FM, Poling Public Radio. We're streaming live right now over Marcy's World Facebook page. And now I invite you to all join me in Marcy's World. We're going to get there using our imagination. Today's story, Greg discovers the truth about Brian. Mom, what do you think of this baseball cap? Greg asked. Oh, I think it looks great. Oh, I'm so glad you're enjoying it. It suits you. That's what Mom said. You know, your opinion means a lot to me. Do you think that's weird? Greg asked that question because he was getting older and he was wondering if he should be more independent and maybe not ask his mom's opinion. Did you ever wonder about that? Did you ever wonder if it was okay to ask your mom or your dad or your big sister or big brother about something you were doing? Sometimes it's a very good idea. Well, Mom thought it wasn't a bad idea to ask her questions. She said, not at all. It's very healthy. It shows that you're a mature young man. Do you know how glad I am that you're my son? And Greg said, oh, I figured that out. And who wouldn't be? I'm smart and I'm cute and I'm just wonderful. Okay, Mr. Modesty, get your books together and then finish your breakfast. So it looks like Greg also had a breakfast thing going on, just like Marcy. Remember when Marcy had to be reminded to finish her breakfast? I think it's pretty common in 2nd and 3rd grade that we have to be reminded, come on, get on, you're getting ready to go to school. So Mom said, finish your breakfast. You know, I'm glad you're my mom, Greg said. He kind of hoped she heard him, but he also sort of hoped that maybe when Mom was cleaning up the dishes, she didn't hear him. Did you ever say something that you thought somebody heard or you wished they didn't hear? Think about that. It's kind of important to think about stuff we say before it comes out of our mouths. We have to be proud of what we say and how we present ourselves. So he said, I'm glad you're my mom. And he kind of hoped she heard him. Do you think that he should have said it loud enough to be sure that she heard him? when we're proud of something we have to say, usually we put a lot of effort into making sure others can hear us. Greg, I heard that, and I'm very glad that you share your thoughts with me. It shows that you're really growing up. I hope your little sister grows up to be as good at sharing thoughts with me as you are. But now I have to say you'll be late for school if you don't hurry up with your oatmeal. As Greg stuffed spoonful after spoonful of oatmeal into his already stuffed cheeks, two of his friends rang the doorbell. "I'll get it," smiled his mom. "Good morning, kids. Come on in. Greg will be ready in a minute." Greg was finally ready. "It's about time," said Brian. "You're so slow all of the time." Huh. You know, Brian sounds like a little bit like the way Annie sounded when she talked to Marcy, if you were around to hear that story. Let's find out what happened and how it was handled. "Oh, just ignore him, Greg," said Marcy. Oh, so Marcy was also there to pick up Greg. Oh, it looks like she finished her oatmeal on time. "Oh, just ignore him, Greg," said Marcy. "Sometimes you can be such a pain, Brian." She said that to Brian. There are all kinds of ways we can talk to people who say things that are not so nice. That's the way Marcy chose. Let's find out what happened. "Bye, Mom," said Greg, reaching to give his mom a hug and a kiss. "Have a good day, kids," said Mom as the three walked to the bus. So it was Marcy and Brian who picked up Greg. Okay. "What a baby you are, hugging and kissing your little mommy," Brian teased. Starts sounding a little bit familiar. Did you ever have a problem with somebody who was making fun of you for doing something that was a very healthy thing to do, like communicate nicely with a brother or a sister or a parent? Did anybody ever make fun of you? If you've ever made fun of somebody else, you might want to rethink that and maybe think about apologizing. Let's see what happened in this story. Tears welled up in Greg's eyes. Marcy walked next to Greg. Then Marcy turned to Brian and said, "You are such a pain sometimes, Brian. Just because your mom never kisses you goodbye, you don't have to make fun of Greg." And turning back to Greg, Marcy said, "Just try not to let him get to you. He's really nice once you get to know him." So Marcy was trying to patch things up between Greg and Brian, but I think it was probably between those two friends to patch things up between themselves. But Marcy got involved, and she was trying to help Greg and Brian the way Nikki helped her. Remember? Nikki helped her with Annie. So let's find out what happened. "Thanks for sticking up for me like that, Marcy." Who said that? If you're listening carefully, you know that it was Greg. "Oh, no problem. Now wipe your eyes. Wipe those tears. Here comes the bus." So the kids were not yet on the bus. So all three children shared a seat. They sat three across, and Marcy sat between Greg and Brian. Greg sat near the window. Brian sat in the aisle seat. Got a picture? "So, what did you do that for?" Marcy said to Brian. And Brian said, "What? What'd I do?" And then he gave an innocent smile. So it was like, "What? What'd I do?" "I saw you trip that boy. What is your problem, Brian?" Oh. So Brian was sitting in the aisle seat, and somebody passed by to get on the bus to take a seat. And it sounds like Brian put his foot out and tripped somebody. I wonder what made Brian act like that. He must have been very, very unhappy about something. Not that every time you're unhappy about something you have to be nasty. But when somebody is nasty, chances are they're very unhappy about something. Well, Brian answered Marcy this way. Oh, bug off! And then he got out of his seat and he left to find a different one. The bus driver pulled up to the school parking area, and Brian waited behind Greg's seat. So Brian took a seat further back, and So the bus driver pulled up to the school parking area, and Brian waited behind Greg's seat, and Brian pushed ahead of Greg to get off the bus. I just can't let him know he upset me, Greg thought. Should I really? I should be polite, but should I have said something to Brian? And these are all the thoughts that are going through Greg's mind. All three entered their classroom and took their seats. Brian was assigned to the desk in front of Greg. Marcy's desk was next to Brian's. As the students all settled in, books and papers were shuffled about, and just then Brian noticed a notepad drop out of Marcy's desk. On the cover was a picture of Brian's favorite team. Greg didn't say anything. He just looked down. And suddenly he saw Brian put Marcy's pad into his own desk. Oh, thought Greg, I just have to say something. He'll probably be mean to me. But what's wrong is wrong, and what's right is right. And I know that I have to do the right thing. Brian, Greg whispered, when are you planning to give Marcy back her notepad? Now, if you've heard the other stories, you know that there was a similar situation that Marcy experienced with Julie. Well, right now, we're going to see how it was handled with these gentlemen. What pad? Brian asked. Do you think Brian really knew what Greg was talking about? You know what pad. Give it back before I tell Marcy. She has tons of pads. She'll never miss it. Bug off, baby who gets mommy hugs. Now, Greg remembered that he was embarrassed this morning, but that didn't stop him from doing what he thought was right. It doesn't matter how many she has. This one is hers and it belongs in her desk, not in yours unless she gives it to you. That's what Greg said. Lighten up. She didn't see me take it. It doesn't matter whether or not she saw you. What's wrong is wrong. Now, Brian thought about it for a minute, and then he tapped Marcy on the shoulder. Here, I think you dropped this, he said, handing Marcy the notepad. Marcy smiled at Brian. Aw, thanks, Brian. This is my best pad with the signature of my favorite soccer player. I really appreciate it. Maybe Brian is a good guy deep inside, Greg thought. Brian flashed Greg a nasty look. Greg's face turned red, and he felt all cold inside. The morning flew by, and Mrs. C announced, time to go out and play, everyone. Put your books in your desks and line up. Brian pushed ahead of Greg. Move it, baby mommy hugger, Brian said. Brian, why do you have such a problem with the fact that I got a hug from my mom? I don't have a problem. You do. That's what Brian said. Yeah, said Greg, you're right. I have a problem understanding why you are so nasty. I don't pick on you. Why do you try to hurt my feelings? That was so courageous of Greg. Marcy interrupted. Don't you know why, Greg? He's jealous of you. He wishes his mom gave him hugs the way yours gives you hugs. The boys decided to have a softball catch. Marcy went to play with Nicky. Is that true, Brian? Asked Greg. tossing the softball gently. Brian started to cry, but he pretended he had something in his eye. Greg felt sad for Brian. "Brian, maybe you should tell your mom you want to give her a hug," suggested Greg. "You should learn how to throw a softball," Brian said. Then he thought about it and said, "Anyway, she's too busy for me." Greg caught the ball and tossed it to Brian as he said, "My mom gets busy too, but she told me that even when she gets busy and sometimes forgets to take time to hug me, it doesn't mean she doesn't have one for me. All I have to do is offer her one of mine and she finds one for me. She always has time for my hugs." Brian caught the ball. "But I want her to offer me a hug first." And he threw the ball to Greg. "She should know that I want a hug." Greg caught the ball. "Nice throw. You know, Brian, parents know a lot of stuff, but they don't always know how to read our minds. Parents sometimes need to be reminded about the hugs, the way we need to be reminded about shutting off lights or putting our bikes away. So if you forget to put your bike away, does it mean you don't like your bike? You just get distracted. Same with parents. They get distracted. So remind your mom, let her know you're ready for the hug, and you know she has one for you. Give her one that you have for her." Just as the boys began to really have a nice talk, the teacher interrupted. "Okay, everyone, time to get back to work. Let's line up and walk quietly inside." And once inside their classroom, Mrs. C announced, "Take your seats and copy your homework. The assignment is on the board." Greg thought about all that Brian said outside. He copied his homework assignment, and the rest of the afternoon, his mind was very busy. He understood Brian a bit better, and suddenly, all the hurtful things Brian said didn't seem so important anymore. That's what we call perspective. 3 o'clock came quickly, and the children ran to their buses, and once Greg arrived home, he saw his mom, dog, and little sister waiting at the bus stop. "Did you have a good day?" asked his mom. "Well, let's go in the house so I could tell you all about it, and Mom, I have a hug for you," said Greg. "Good, 'cause I have one for you too," said Mom. "Mom, I love your hugs. Do you think I'm too old for them?" asked Greg. "Greg, you are never too old for good feelings and sharing. In fact, the older you get, the more important these things are. I love your hugs, and I love you," said his mom. So, the things I'd like you to think about as our listening audience is what, in your opinion, helped Greg to feel better about what happened with Brian? When you're sad, how do you handle it? And do you usually get angry, nasty, quiet, or loud? And what's a good way to handle sadness? What is a not so good way to handle sadness? Sharing your feelings with a parent is very important, and it helps to create trust. And that's one of the most important things two people can share. One way to relax yourself and your parents is to develop trust. Do this by telling your parent about your day, what you learned, who you talked to. And here's an experiment. Ask one or both of your parents what they did today. Ask them how they feel sometimes, and see what you can all learn about each other. So we're going to be taking a short break, and when we get back, When we get back, I'll have Dr. Michael Gazy, who's a doctor of naturopathy, as my guest, and we're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff. Now for you. If you'd like to hear the interview with Dr. Michael Gazy, it may be heard on my Facebook page, which is Holistic and Integrative Healing. Putting it right there. And I'm Dr. Nancy Iankowitz, family nurse practitioner, author of Marcy and Her Friends, and host of Marcy's World. I'm director of Holistic and Integrative Healing, and we have a whole bunch of health-related stuff on that page. So feel free to look up anything you like. Bye-bye for now.